Okay, everyone. Glad you're here today. And you're in for a treat. I think this is our first ever family care seminar. We've been thinking about doing this for a long time, and here we are doing our first one. And so thank you for being here and signing up. I think you'll enjoy what you hear and great information. I love the Proverbs. There are several Proverbs about this. Let me just give you one. This is Proverbs 19, and it says, "Listen to advice and accept instruction that you may gain wisdom in the future." Well, that's a good one, isn't it? That's what we're doing tonight. I'm going to introduce our speaker, who is Don Hubbard. Some of you may have already know him, but I'm very excited to have him here today because not only is he a financial planner, he's a Christian. And so let me just read his bio to you. He's a deacon and Sunday school director or teacher at Northside Baptist Church of Weatherford. We just talked about what he's teaching a while ago. And in fact, his office, if you go to Weatherford and see Northside Baptist on the left on North Main, his office is right across the street. Right straight across the street right there. 25 years experience as a financial advisor, certified retirement counselor, certified kingdom advisor. You can tell them what that means, maybe. BS, that doesn't sound too good. BS at Tarleton State University, 12-year law enforcement career. Married to Kim for 38 years, and you've got pictures. You'll show them in a minute, maybe for that. 2 adult daughters, sons-in-law. But the main thing, he's a Christian, and we're so glad to have him. But his topic is going to involve tax planning to retirement and beyond. You're going to get a bonus because he's going to give you a biblical overview of retirement planning today, in addition to the tax planning. So that's going to be great. We're so glad, Don, to have you today. But can we pray before we start? And I'm going to hand it over to Don. And by the way, at the end of I think what he's going to do is at the end of the seminar, if you have questions unanswered that he doesn't cover, feel free to raise your hand. If you're staying for the second session, after he finishes, that will start at 6 o'clock. Okay, the second section. Most of you sign up for both. Just a trivia, but we have 99 people who have signed up for at least one of the 10 seminars that we're doing as of today. And I think we had 79 sign up for today's. So thank you so much for being here. This is going to be a great time. Would you join me and let's pray. Father God, we come to you because, Lord, we're your children and we love you. And we're so grateful, Lord, that you've enabled us to be here today. And Lord, we pray, Lord, that the information we receive will be honorable to you, that we can use it for your glory, because that's what we're here to do. And we thank you, and we praise your holy name. In Jesus we pray. Amen. Help me welcome Don Hubbard.
Good evening. Thank you all for having me tonight. I'm not sure how good it is that I'm the first one. It may run you off before anybody else gets in here. He mentioned the BS, and I'm not going to go into that part, but I can be accused of that sometimes. I've got a long history with First Baptist Church Springtown. There's probably a lot of you in here know my father-in-law. He didn't mention that, but Clarence and Ola Colwell are my mother-in-law and father-in-law. I've been married to their youngest daughter for 38 years. July the 11th was 38 years we've been married. So that may make some of you glad that I'm related to him. Some of you may say, I don't know. So, like you said, I hold a couple of different designations. I've been in the business for 25 years now. I'm a certified financial planner, a certified retirement counselor, but I'm also a certified kingdom advisor. And that's a designation that I sought about, I guess, about 8 or 9 years ago. It's for advisors that want to be able to provide advice from a biblical perspective. And you know, the scripture says a lot about a lot of things, but it says more about money than almost anything else. Let me ask, what's the one area in your spiritual life that you cannot fake? Anybody have an answer for that? Stewardship. Yeah, stewardship's the one thing you really can't fake. You're either it's going to play out at some point in time whether you're being a good steward or not. I've got a handout that I think he may have put in front of you that has some biblical principles on that. I just wanted to run through that real quick before I went through the kind of the pre-approved seminar that I've got from the broker-dealer firm that I'm affiliated with. But when it comes to money, there's really only four things you can do with it. You can live off your money, you can give your money, you can owe your money, or you can grow your money. And there's really nothing else that you can do with it. I mean, we live off what we live off, our lifestyle that we decide upon. That takes up a piece of the pie. Whatever we give is another piece of the pie. What we owe, whether we owe in debt or whether we owe in taxes, and then the money that we have set aside that we're able to grow for our future, are the four things that we can do. But the important thing to remember is that God owns it all, and that we're not owners of any of it. We're called to be stewards of the resources that God's provided us with. And with that, I've got 5 money management principles that I talk about with my clients, that I think they come from Scripture. And the thing about principles is that principles never change. Principles are true, they're built off of truth, and they stay the same. And those principles are to spend less than you earn, to give generously, avoid debt, build margin into your life, whether that's in your financial life or your personal life. Whatever you do, you need to have margin outside, not have your budget completely full. And the other is to set long-term goals. All 5 of those are biblical principles that we need to follow. But I'm going to start today. Donnie had me down for tax planning. I'm not a CPA. So like I said, I'm a financial planner. So what I'm really going to talk about is income in retirement and preparing for retirement. But we're going to touch on taxes with that as well, because taxes play a big part of that. I know some of you in here are already retired, and some are probably looking forward to retirement soon. So, there it goes. So where to start when it comes time to retire? There's a lot of questions you've got to ask yourself. I guess first, here's what we're going to cover. Where to start, income, expenses, Social Security, how much will you need, and then are you ready? And like I said, some of you may already be in retirement, but where to start? The first thing, I guess, to ask yourself is where are you going to live? What are you going to do? How much money will you need? How much money do I have? And what are the likely health-related issues that I'm going to face? Because we're all going to be facing those things in retirement. They're a big part of planning for retirement. So starting off, the first thing to do is to have a budget. And I don't know if you have a budget now, if you're pre-retirement or in retirement, but that's going to be the first thing that you're going to want to look at doing, is making sure that you have a budget. Oh, that's moving ahead, isn't it? You want to have a budget, and what does a budget do? It's a spending plan. It identifies where your money goes. It can limit the amount that you spend on certain categories and expenses, and it helps you to reach your financial goals. When you know what the budget is, then it allows you to reach for other goals as well at the same time. So here's a few things, reasons to budget. Control. Like I said, it allows you to control your expenses when you know what they're going to be. It helps you to stay organized when it comes tax time. If you've got everything entered into a budget, it lets you know what your opportunities are. Not just opportunities to invest, but opportunities to do the things that you want to do in retirement. If you know that your budget allows for you to do those extra things that you want to do with family and friends, then you're able to do that without being concerned. Hey, am I able to do that this month? So I think it's important to have a budget. It also gives, like I said, extra time at tax time. If you've had everything in the budget, you're not having to get everything all gathered up. It's something that you've been doing all along. And then finally, it allows you to have more money if you're budgeting. When that pie chart I handed out that had that live, give, owe, and grow, we all have just a limited amount of resources. And that pie is only so big. There are no independent financial decisions you make. Every decision you make financially affects the other piece of that pie. The money that I choose to live on affects how much I can give. It affects how much money I've got to grow. It affects how much money I may owe. The money that I choose to give away, it affects the other. It lowers, what I can live off of. But at the same time, it lowers what I pay in taxes. So each financial decision we make is interdependent with the other decisions. Like I said, that at least for me, that pie is limited. It's not an unlimited pie. So we need to know what our resources are. So what do we do when we do a budget? Does everybody in here do a budget? Or I'm going to guess some of us probably don't. When I mention the words budget to my wife, it's like, oh no, I don't want to do that. And if you follow Dave Ramsey, he talks about there's always somebody in the family that wants to do the budget. Somebody's the saver, somebody's the planner, and somebody's the spender. And that's always the case. So, like I said, I think it's important to have a detailed budget. But if you're married to someone like my wife, sometimes that doesn't work. And so if that's the case, then I would say you want to at least make sure that the biggest things are always taken care of. So for us, it was, all right, this is the income. We know what we've got to, we know what's going to go, what we're giving away. We know what the tithe is. We know what we owe in taxes. And this is the number that's invested. This is the amount that's going to be saved. And then when it comes to the live part, I just kind of leave her alone because I don't want to know. But I know it's a limited amount that she gets, so the other part's taken care of. So you just got to figure that out for you and your family, how that works for you. But I think if you've got a detailed budget, then you're better off. It just makes things easier. So how do we do that? The first thing that we've got to look at is our expenses. And there's two kinds, fixed expenses and variable expenses. What would be an example of each? Health insurance, okay. Would you put that as fixed or variable? Fixed, okay. Yeah, I put insurance and utilities in there as fixed, but I know that's maybe not necessarily so. They seem to vary from time to time. What else would be a fixed expense? Mortgage, okay. Yeah, so the different types of fixed expenses really are your taxes, your mortgage and rent, utilities, insurance, your automobile. Those type of things we know we're going to have every month. So we want to make sure that no matter what, we've got those expenses covered. And all of those fixed expenses are probably also non-discretionary expenses. They're things we've got to spend money on, each and every one of us, more than likely. And then what would be variable expenses? Groceries, okay. Gas, restaurants, dining out, vacations, stuff like that. Absolutely. So all of those things, food, clothing, furniture, fixing appliances and stuff like that, all those change from time to time. But gifts and vacation, personal items, all of that would be variable expenses. So after we've done our expenses, what do we look at next? What was that? What's left over? Okay. And how do we know what's left over? To do that, we've got to know what our income is. And so there's different kinds of income. If you're working still, you've got your wages and salary. You may have income from self-employment or from pension, IRA distributions, interest and dividends, and then the big one for most people that are in retirement is Social Security. So once you've got your income minus your expenses, that's kind of the moment of truth. Can I afford to retire? Or can I afford to live the lifestyle I'm living, even if I'm not retired? Because there's a lot of people that their income's less than their expenses, and when it is, they're not avoiding the debt. They don't have that margin in their life. And what does the scripture say about us being in debt? It says we're a slave to the lender. It doesn't say that debt's a sin, but it gives an awful lot of warnings about it. So that's the moment of truth. Can we afford to retire at that time? After we've done our budget, what's the next thing that I'd recommend anybody do is to figure out what their net worth is, to do a balance sheet. And how do we do that? It's pretty simple. It's assets minus your liabilities. So it's everything that you own minus what you owe, and it tells you what your net worth is. And so with assets, what you want to do is total up, like I said, everything you've got: cash, stocks and bonds, mutual funds, your home, your car, your truck, all your furnishings, everything that you have. But when I say that, what it's valued at today, not the value that you put on it, because I promise you what you paid for is not what it's worth. Everything we've got is going for pennies on the dollar. So it's what the value of it really is. And you can, like I said, with cash and real estate and stuff like that, it's easy. With vehicles, it's easy with Blue Book value and stuff. But the stuff that you've paid for and that you think's really expensive and that your kids really want, they don't. And it has no value. All that stuff that's sentimental value, no value. Get rid of it. Your kids, don't count that in your assets because it has no value. It has no value. So assets there. Yeah. Now this is a true story. I kind of got, if y'all know Ola, I guess probably 10 or 12 years ago, she sat us all down and handed out a book. She wanted us to write down, look around and write down anything you want, and we'll make sure you get that in the will. And I told her, I said, if it doesn't have acres behind it or an account number in front of it, I don't want it. And she goes, are you serious? I said, yeah, I don't want it. Because they got a lot of stuff. And it's worth pennies on the dollar. But know what your assets are. And then the next thing, liabilities. And liabilities aren't the same as expenses. I mean, the expenses you have every month, liabilities are what you really owe. And some of those liabilities may be backed by some of those assets that you have. But it's probably, hopefully it's a small number, but for some it may be a large number. So everything that you owe, your mortgage, your car, any other debts, the taxes you have due, and major unpaid medical bills are kind of the main things to look at there. Why do you need to know your net worth? Why is that a good idea? What's that? So you don't overspend. Well, your budget does that. The budget helps with the spending. I think that the big thing on the net worth, I mean, it helps with a few things. One is estate planning. When you get ready to do your will or you meet with an attorney to do that, it's good if you walk in ready to do that and you know what your assets are. It also helps in the event that you do need to apply for a loan or anything, because that's something that a bank's going to ask you about. So a couple of the well, again, assets minus liabilities are your net worth. Applying for a loan, doing your will, also determining what your insurance needs are. I mean, there comes a point in life where we have to ask ourselves, do we really need life insurance? And if so, what's an appropriate amount? It may be that we have enough assets to provide for our loved ones without paying for insurance anymore. Or we may have assets that need to be protected, and we need to know the amounts that we need for that. And then also, if you've got a financial goal, it kind of tells you where you're at on progress towards meeting that goal. That being said, your net worth has absolutely nothing to do with your self-worth. So don't let people make you feel that it does, and don't, just because you see your net worth grow, don't allow that to allow you to think that your self-worth is more because of that, because it's not. We're all created in God's image. It doesn't matter what our net worth is. And I think it's important to realize that, because we live in a place where we can get puffed up sometimes if our net worth gets up there high. So it's like I said, God owns it all. We're just called to be stewards. And so I think it's important to remember that and to ask ourselves sometimes, how much is enough? How much is enough to live on, and how much is enough to have? And not let that become the end-all, be-all. Any questions on budget and net worth? Comments so far? All right. The next thing I'm going to dive into a couple different things to talk about. I know since we're talking about retirement and taxes also, we want to talk about Social Security. A lot of you in here already own Social Security, I'm assuming. And some of us in here are not at that point yet. Who knows what the full retirement age is right now for Social Security? It depends on your date of birth. If you were born in 1937 or earlier, it was 65 years of age. For those of us that are born after 1960, it's 67 years of age. So it was 65 for everybody up until, I think, 1983 when Ronald Reagan was president. They looked at the system then and said, hey, the system's broken. We've got to do something to extend it. And they started raising the age and raised it from 65 to 67. When I think Social Security is 90 years old today, or just the last week or two, it just passed the 90-year point. What was average life expectancy when Social Security started 90 years ago? Can anybody guess?
Less than 5 years.
Average life expectancy was 63. So you weren't expected to get Social Security. It was meant to be a safety net. It wasn't something that people were really expected to get. And there were a lot more workers contributing to it per people that were receiving income from it. So that's part of the reason they addressed that in 1983. And they're going to have to address it again because the year I turned 67, they're expected to go broke again. I just kind of hit on that bubble, I guess. So I think they'll address it with the age, partly that they'll raise it, and they probably need to look at doing that for full retirement age because we're simply living a lot longer than we were then. So 67 is full retirement age. Why is it important to know what the full retirement age is? Any guesses? Say again? To get the maximum benefit, exactly. The benefit for those that are that is 1967 or those born in 1960 and later, if you take an early benefit, it's reduced by 6% a year. So for those of us that start at 1960 and later, if we start taking income at 62, that income benefit is going to be reduced by 30%. It's reduced 6% for every year that you take it early. For those that were born before 1960, it's reduced between 5 and 6% for the number of years that you started early. Is there a benefit to waiting beyond age 67 to start it, or full retirement age? There is. If you're still working, there's a huge benefit to waiting beyond full retirement age. Every year that you wait beyond full retirement age, then your benefit goes up by 8%. So to put that into numbers, if you were born in 1960 or later, for every $1,000 you would get for Social Security as a full benefit, if you start at 62, it's going to be reduced to $700 a month. But if you wait until 70, it's going to be increased to $1,240 a month. So you're going to get that 8% for every year that you wait to do that. So the longer you wait, the more you get for Social Security, if you live long enough. So it kind of depends. It depends on how long you live. I have people come to my office all the time, and we talk about their Social Security. When should I take it? And my answer is always the same. If you can tell me the month and the year you're going to die, I can tell you for sure the best time to claim it, because you just don't know. But I will tell you that the break even is normally around age 80 to 81. So if you live beyond 80 or 81 years of age, you were probably better off to wait longer to take it because you end up receiving more in income from Social Security by waiting to take it. But there can certainly be reasons for taking it earlier. I mean, if you're forced to retire, you have to retire, and you have to have that money to live off of, then it can make sense to take it earlier. What's the main reason, though, for not taking it? Again, it can be reduced, and then it goes up. Income tax on benefits. This is one thing I know Donnie really wanted me to touch on. When Donald Trump ran for office, he said that we were no longer going to pay taxes on Social Security. That's not true. They didn't do away with taxes on Social Security. It stayed the same. However, there is a new $6,000 deduction to those that are 65 and older. So that's meant to offset it. So the way that the taxes on Social Security works is that Uncle Sam looks at your entire income or your total income, your adjusted gross income, which is all of your income plus half of your Social Security. And if that number for a married couple is less than $32,000, then congratulations, you don't owe any taxes on your Social Security. But on the other hand, you live on less than $32,000 a year. If your income as a married couple is between $32,000 and $44,000, then you owe 50% in taxes on your Social Security. Oh, let me back up. You owe taxes on 50% of your Social Security. I almost said that wrong, didn't I? So depending on your income tax bracket, you owe taxes on 50% of your Social Security. And then for those with the income is over $44,000, then 85% of your Social Security is taxable. You don't owe 85%, but 85% is taxable. Almost said that wrong. The big reason for not taking early Social Security, in addition to the to the deduction that you get of that 6% is if you're still working, you're penalized for taking it early. In 2025, if you're below full retirement age and you decide to take Social Security before the full retirement age, then for every $2 you make over $22,400, Social Security takes $1 of that back from you. So I always tell my clients, if you're still working, I would encourage you not to take Social Security until full retirement age. Once you're full retirement age, then you can make as much as you want to make without being penalized with your Social Security. In the year that you actually turn 67 or turn your full retirement age, then it's $1 for every $3 you make over that amount. So the penalty goes down a little bit there. But like I said, it's pretty punitive if you're working and you start taking Social Security early. Here's just a list of things. If you're soon to apply for Social Security, here's a list of things that you would want to take with you whenever you go in to apply for Social Security. And I'm sure they'll be very helpful at the Social Security offices. Is that right? If anybody that's been in there, anytime you're dealing with a government agency, it can be ticklish. So how much money will you need in retirement? Kind of a good rule of thumb. Yes, sir.
You touched one thing for everybody. Another benefit of waiting to 67 being that higher dollar amount is the case of a husband passing and then the spouse getting the larger amount.
Absolutely. That's a huge thing. So with Social Security, for those that are non-working spouses, if you're a non-working spouse, you're going to be entitled to half of your spouse's benefit. Or if your benefit, let me rephrase that. If you're a non-working spouse or a lower income spouse, you're going to be entitled to half of your spouse's Social Security during retirement. If that spouse passes away before you do, then you're going to step up to their Social Security benefit. So that is another huge reason for waiting to take Social Security. If the higher earning spouse waits till 70, they're going to have the highest benefit available. So even if they die before age 80, but their spouse lives to be 90, their spouse is going to be collecting their Social Security. Is that what you wanted me to touch on? One of the rules that changed just in the last year was the Fairness Act. I'm sure there's some people in here that were probably educators, and for years, educators in the state of Texas did not pay into Social Security, and so there were two different laws: the government pension offset and the windfall elimination provision that applied to them, and so it could be very punitive to them. If their spouse passed away, they may only receive their spouse's Social Security minus their pension. So it was a small amount that they got, and so that changed just this last year. And so now they actually will receive the spousal benefit that they should have been entitled to all along. Yes, ma'am.
The beginning of 2025. I'm 85.
Yes, ma'am.
And at the beginning of 2025, I got a message that they did not pay enough in 2024. Therefore, I got over $2,000 extra for the month of January.
And are you a retired educator?
Yes.
All right.
No, I was just retired.
Okay. But they didn't pay enough and caught it up and
So they
made
really doubled what I was getting.
good. And then you're getting a higher amount now.
Yes.
So, well, there were a lot of educators during the spring of this year got a check because they went retroactive, I think, to January of last year. And so there were some that received that. So how much do you need in retirement? Any guesses on that? As a general rule of thumb, most people would say 75 to 85 to 90%. That's probably a pretty good rule of thumb. People ask me how much do I need to retire on, and it's different for everybody because we all have different lifestyles that we want to have in retirement. For some people, it may be staying at home and not doing anything, not going anywhere, not changing their life much. And for others, it may be traveling for a number of years. And there's different ways of looking at. For some people, they think they need to increase their income every year by 3 or 4%. That may not be the case, because I've seen with a lot of clients, they want to really go those first couple of years, but when they're 85 or 90, they may not be doing near the traveling they were doing in their 60s or early 70s. So that number can look different for everybody. But as a general rule of thumb, you probably need to have about 75% of your income. And where does that come from? Here's a place where, it's the percentages of where the average income comes from. And so Donnie asked me to talk about taxes, so I'm going to kind of talk about it right here a little bit. We talked about how Social Security is taxed. Government and pensions, those are taxed, and typically private pensions are taxed as well. So there's 18% of our income today comes from pensions of Americans. That number used to be a lot higher, but fewer and fewer people today have the pensions that they used to have. And again, those pensions are going to be taxable, because the money that was put into those pensions were tax deductible to the employer when they went into those. Asset income, that income could be from a number of different places. So, if it's tax-free or municipal bond income, then certainly that income would be tax-free. But most income, other than maybe if you have an annuity that's been annuitized, it can be taxed in such a way that some of it's not taxable. And then the other, for younger workers today, are those that have the Roth IRAs, then that income can be tax-free. And so if you're somebody that's in your mid-50s to earlier, then looking at the Roth IRAs versus the traditional IRAs, or the Roth 401ks versus the traditional, could be something that you certainly may want to consider looking at hard, because right now we're in a low tax rate environment compared to historical numbers. I know that when they signed the big beautiful bill, they said that these tax cuts, or the tax brackets, are permanent. The tax brackets are written in pencil. The tax brackets are permanent until they change them. So that just means they're not going to automatically go up. But at some point, the tax brackets are going to be higher than they are today. Because, like I said, they're at traditionally low numbers. So if you're still working and you've got years till retirement, then the Roth can certainly make a lot of sense. And it can also make sense to look at Roth conversions also. But those numbers need to be looked at pretty hard, and every individual needs to look at them differently, because it can have a different effect. There can be times you don't want to do that. It can be costly if you do that wrong. And then, of course, earnings. If you're still working during retirement, then earnings will be taxable as well. And more people are working in retirement today. So retirement looks a lot different than it did, 30 years ago, where people were retiring and not going back to work. But a lot of my clients, they seem to retire, and they're retired for a year or 2 years, and they're right back in the workforce doing something again. And I think there's a reason for that. I think we were created to work. I mean, that's just what we were created to do. Donnie's shaking his head, but I've known Donnie for 20 years now, and it works. Not something I've seen him do hard.
Would you delineate between the Roth IRA and traditional?
Yeah, the difference, Uncle Sam always has his hand out, always. And so it's a matter of, does he have his hand out before you invest the money or after you've invested the money? So traditionally, retirement accounts were always tax deferred. So the money that's gone into them have been pre-tax dollars, which means the money went in without paying taxes on it. So Uncle Sam's hand was not out at that time. And whatever the money grows to over all those years, it grows tax deferred, meaning that you don't pay taxes on the capital gains or dividends. It just continues to grow. But when the money comes out, as it has to do, then Uncle Sam puts his hand out, and you have to pay taxes on it at that time. And there's only a few. There is a way to get money out, though, tax-free, but the only one that I know of, and that's through charitable givings, and that's something that I want to talk to you all about. So and the other is the Roth IRA. So with the Roth IRA, you pay Uncle Sam up front on the money that you put into a Roth IRA or a 401k. And then as long as that money's invested for at least 5 years and until you're 59 and a half, then all of that growth is tax-free. But Uncle Sam limits what your income can be if you're putting money into a Roth IRA. Does that answer the question? Okay.
Talk about what you thought about the charitable giving and the way you can
Yeah.
R&D.
So where we've got up here, asset income the asset income would be in two different places. If it's tax deferred, it's probably going to be either in a 401k plan or in an IRA account. And if it's in either one, money has to come out of those plans at a certain point in time. Right now, the required minimum distribution age is 73. It used to be 70 and a half, but right now it's 73, and it's going to continue to go up to 75. So if you have money in those plans, Uncle Sam, again, says, that's great, you saved it, but it can't stay in there and grow tax deferred forever. I want to be paid taxes on it. So at 73, you have to start taking out about 4 to 5%. That number gets a little bit bigger every year, the amount that you have to take out. You can't do it in a 401k, but if the money is in an IRA and you're over 70 and a half, you can do what's called a qualified charitable distribution, and you can give up to $100,000 a year from your IRA to a charity without paying taxes on it. So I encourage my folks that are over 70 and a half, rather than giving your tithe from your income, it may make sense to give your tithe from your IRA account, especially since the standard deduction is now around $30,000, and most of us aren't itemizing our deductions anymore. It allows us to still take that standard $30,000 deduction for a married couple and then give money directly from our IRA account without paying taxes on it. So, like I said, you don't have to start taking money out till 73, but you can start doing the charitable distributions at 70 and a half. But you have to be 70 and a half to do that.
Is there any exceptions to that? Is there any exceptions
To doing the qualified?
to the 70 and a half, for instance, terminal illness?
No. You can you can still take the money out, but it's not going to be, you got to pay taxes on it. Yeah, the only way to do the charitable is through it's called a qualified charitable distribution. Yeah, but 70 and a half. And like I said, so money in that's one advantage, in my opinion, to an IRA over leaving the money in an employer plan, is because with both you have to take the required distribution, but you can't do the charitable distribution from the 401k plan. So, so inflation, we don't have that anymore, do we? Not at all. So it's important to remember that things are always going to cost more in the future than they do today. And this is just an example right now that the average cost of a home in South Florida is $361,000. In 5 years, it'll probably be $418,000. 10 years, it'll be $485,000. An RV, about $73,000 today. In 10 years, you can expect it to cost $98,000. And while a round of golf is $75, in 10 years, it'll probably be $101. And those numbers seem high, but those are at Rockwood Golf Course on Jacksboro Highway, $77 on a weekend. So those numbers are pretty well in line with where things are today. And I think that's probably looking at just 3% inflation, which has kind of been the average. I know it's been a little higher than that the last couple of years, but that's never going to go away. It never seems to go down in value. Life expectancy, we touched on that a little bit, a few years ago, or when Social Security started, the average life expectancy was 63. Today, an average 65-year-old man can expect to live to be 82. An average 65-year-old female can expect to live to be age 85. I know that the average life expectancy is only around 78 or so, but this is taking into account you've already lived to 65, so you've beat a whole lot of the people that would have died before that. That's just the way stats work. And for a 65-year-old non-smoking healthy couple, it's a 50% chance that one of you is going to live to 92 years of age. How many folks in here know anybody over 100? A few of you do. Yeah. If I'd asked you that 20 years ago, who could have raised their hand? Nobody. One person back here. Yeah. People didn't live as long then as we do today. So I think you'll just see those numbers continue to increase and go up. So we got a plan for long term in retirement. The other thing to talk about in retirement is medical expenses. The medical expenses for a 65-year-old couple, probably about $330,000 is what they can expect to spend in retirement on medical care total. Total, yeah. What was that? If you're healthy, that's not including long-term care. So that's not including nursing home care. I'm going to touch on Medicare just a little bit. I know that I think Ron Hunn's coming in here next, and so he may touch on Medicare a whole lot more. Ron Hunn, right back there, seeing him. So you're going to touch on Medicare a lot more than I will, won't you? Okay. So just touching on Medicare a little bit. Eligibility at 65. There's 4 parts to it. Part A covers hospital insurance. Part B is medical. Part C are the Advantage plans. Part D is the prescription drug plan, and then there are the Medigap plans as well. So I'm going to leave all that to Ron to talk to you about it, because I know Ron knows the Medicare better than I do. That's something he specializes in more. Medicare premiums, I'm going to talk about that just a little bit because of the budget. Is for Part A, it's usually free for most people. Part B is between $185 to $628 a month per person. And that depends on what your income was 2 years before that. And so that's something you always need to be aware of if you've got a big influx of income in 1 year. I've had clients before that, they sell a piece of property, and all of a sudden they're shocked 2 years later that their Social Security is not what it was the year before. And it's because they sold a piece of property or something that maybe they had, $250,000, $300,000 in gains, and that can cause their Medicare premium to go up for a year. After that, it goes back down, and there's a form you can fill in, but for a big expense like that, it doesn't cover it. So you're going to get hit with a higher Medicare premium for a year. So just be aware if you've got a big sale or something that you receive a big sum of money, that's something that's going to hit you for 1 year. Medigap, I'm not going to go into that. I'll let Ron cover that more. Long-term care insurance, who needs it? Ron needs it. Who else needs it? Everybody. People tell me all the time, say, "Oh, my kids are going to take care of me," and my answer is always the same. Really? When's the last time your kids saw you naked, and when's the next time you want them to see you naked? And the answer has been a long time, and you don't want them to. So long-term care insurance or long-term care coverage is something we need to plan. The great philosopher Mike Tyson says everybody's got a plan until he gets hit in the mouth. Long-term, if you have a long-term care issue, it can be a real hit in the mouth in your retirement years. It can be something that can be pretty devastating to a family. What do you think the average long-term care cost a year is? I guess for a private room in the U.S.? Ron, you can't answer. You know the answers. What do you think the average cost is? I heard somebody said over here, $100,000 a year is the average cost for long-term care in the U.S. So that can be a big expense. So you got a plan, and the plan is either you're not insured or you are. And there's different types of long-term care insurance. Or there are the kind of the older-fashioned ones where you pay the premiums, and if you don't use it, maybe you've lost it, but you're paying a smaller amount every year. There are hybrid policies today where you can buy a life insurance policy that has a long-term care with that. You know the money's coming back to you or your family no matter what, but it's more expensive to buy that. It's more money out of pocket. But there are alternatives on long-term care, and it's something that you need to explore because, like I said, it can be very expensive. And I think longtermcare.gov has some information on that, and then the National Clearinghouse for Long-Term Care. And I think, so my question is, are you ready to retire? This is part of the handout that I gave out there. I know it's got the live, give, grow, and grow that I handed out. And then there's also a piece there with some ages that I think are important to know. And age 50 is when you can start making catch-up contributions to an IRA account or to a 401k account. Age 59 and a half is when you can start to draw money from a retirement account without paying the 10% penalty on those accounts. Age 65 is when you need to sign up for Medicare, and when Medicare. 66 is full retirement age for some today, and then age 73 is the required minimum distribution age. And then the other one, like I said, that I think is important to remember on there is age 70 and a half, because that's when you can do the qualified charitable distributions. And I can assure you First Baptist Springtown would be glad to accept a check from your brokerage firm or wherever your IRA is held. So when you do those, they make the check payable directly to the charity, and it can be any 501c3. So with First Baptist being a 501c3, you can do your tithe directly to them from your IRA account, and then that money coming out of your IRA allows that money you don't have to pay taxes on it. So there is a benefit to that. Questions on any of this? There are some worksheets there as well. That if you want, I can. Oh, let me get over to something else here. I had another file that I wanted to look at, but I don't think it's sharing it there. I don't think it's pulling it up. Donnie asked me to just speak on the tax benefits from the new tax laws. I touched on there is that $6,000 deduction now for seniors. The other one is that for tips below $12,000 a year are now tax-free. I would tell you that one of the new rules they had is there is a car loan interest deduction for new purchases of all U.S. assembled passenger vehicles. That's in 2025 through 2028. But I would tell you that when it comes to deducting interest, it costs you a lot more in interest than you're able to deduct. And so I wouldn't try to take advantage of that one, because you live, give, owe, and grow, and we want to owe less. And then also for local tax deductions, they've increased that from $10,000 to $40,000 this year. So where we were limited on what we could deduct for our property taxes, that number's been increased. So that's kind of what I wanted to cover. Well, the other big one was for estate planning issues, that they've made the estate tax limit now is $15 million for an individual and $30 million for a couple, and they made that permanent now. And again, permanent means until a different party in office decides they want to change that, and then they'll vote on that and decide if that was permanent or it was temporary. But right now, that's made permanent. So we've got time for questions. I'll be glad to answer any questions I can, but that kind of covered what I had prepared on that. So, and did I see somebody back here? Okay. No questions at all.
Sure.
You got 4 or 5? There's always someone.
So, what ways can I reduce federal tax burden if I go to convert traditional to a Roth?
If you're not reducing the federal tax burden today. It can reduce your tax burden in the future. So, yeah. So if you're converting today, the only way you can really reduce your tax burden is through I mean, unless you own a business, is through the deductions from your property tax, unreimbursed medical care, and your charitable giving. So if you're wanting to reduce that tax burden, would be more charitable giving would lower that amount. And it's just an idea of if you are converting from traditional to Roth, you want to make sure that you stay within a tax bracket and not bust that bracket and go into a higher bracket. Right. And you want to do it, during lower income years. The reason for doing it today for people would be because they believe tax rates are going to be higher in the future. Which more than likely they're going to be higher because we're spending money like a drunken sailor. And there's no, tax breaks are going to be higher someday than they are today, I would think.
So according to income limits, one can contribute to a Roth, correct?
Correct. And that limit, you're capped at about, I think I refuse to memorize the numbers because they change every year, but I think it's right now for a married couple, it's $236,000 is where it starts. So if your income's below $236,000, you can make a Roth contribution. If your income's above the threshold, you can't make any, but you can do what's called a backdoor Roth. Or you can do a backdoor Roth. And a backdoor Roth, if anybody doesn't know, is making a non-deductible contribution to a traditional IRA and then converting it to a Roth IRA. And you do it immediately after you do it so that it hadn't grown in value. Because if a married couple, 55, both put $8,000 into it, $16,000 in a non-deductible IRA, they could convert it to a Roth and they wouldn't pay any taxes on it because you didn't deduct it when you did that. So it's just going through an extra step that the government makes you go through.
So the follow-on to that question is, does a Roth conversion count towards your MHEI, which determines whether or not you can actually do that 8,000, 16,000 Roth contribution? So if you convert from traditional to Roth, does that money factor into your MHEI?
It would factor into it. I believe it would.
So that'll boot you out?
You would still be able to you can still do a conversion. It might just stop you from making a contribution. It doesn't stop you from converting. There's not an income limit on being able to do a conversion, but there's an income limit on being able to do a contribution to a Roth IRA.
We'll have to talk more about that,
Okay.
because I think I read different.
There are limits. I mean,
And so it says that, what I read, Mr. Hubbard, was that if I actually convert traditional to Roth, those monies are actually separated back and not accounted for. And only wages, interest, dividends, capital gains are figured in that.
in that modified adjust. Okay. And if you're doing, I'd have to check to be sure on that then, because I would have thought that would count as taxable income because it's a conversion. But I would have to look to be certain on that. That might be a CPA question. Others? Other question?
Sure. So you talked about the big beautiful bill, the $6,000 increase per senior.
Right.
But then there's a phase out of that, right?
There is, and I'm not certain what that number is with what I've got here, but there is a phase out on that.
I wrote phase out 6%. I'm not sure.
I'm not certain of what that phase out is on what I have. So, yeah, the firm that I cleared through just put out a brochure or just put out a fact sheet on that just in the last week or two because I mean it was just passed recently, and so I don't have all the numbers on that. So, but I know there is a phase out on that based on your income. Any other questions? All right.
No one has a question. Anybody else? Now's the time to ask it. We still have,
You may want a few minutes of a break.
we still have about 10 minutes before we take the break if we need it for questions. We're gonna take questions till about 10 till.
Okay, so I got another. So, if you can't contribute to a Roth due to income, you can still contribute, I'm asking the question. Right. Can you still contribute to a traditional, even though it might not be tax deductibles? But I believe I'm saying this correctly, you could still contribute $70,000 to a traditional, even though you cannot deduct it from taxes, but then you could take those monies and roll them over to a Roth. And my question is, how, if you're not deducting that traditional from your taxes, then if you convert that to a Roth, how are those taxes?
You're not, so, if,
Money sitting in a traditional.
so if you're not a participant in a qualified plan, then you're able to make those contributions to an IRA regardless of income. If you or your spouse are participants of a qualified plan, a 401k, a simple, a SEP, any of those, then there's an income limit as to whether or not you can make a deductible IRA contribution. So if you're over those, you don't make those deductible contributions, but you can make a non-deductible contribution to an IRA. And because it's non-deductible, you're then able to convert, not roll it over, but you can convert it to a Roth IRA, and there's no taxes owed because you didn't deduct that money. You put $8,000 into if you had put $8,000 into an IRA and deducted it 10 years ago, and you were converting it now, and it's grown to $16,000, you would pay taxes on the $16,000 you converted. But if you put $8,000 in today, and it was a non-deductible contribution, and you converted it, you wouldn't owe any taxes on it if you did it immediately, because it was, you put the $8,000 in, then you converted it. But if it grew, then you would owe taxes on the growth. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Okay.
So my follow-up question is, who keeps track of all those records?
Uncle Sam and you, I mean, you've got to be able to document that it was you're going to show that it was a non-deductible contribution, but it's a matter of having to do it immediately. So, yeah, you just got to be reported on. It's got to be reported on the tax return. And those the qualified charitable distributions in the past, most of the firms did not show that on the 1099 that it was a qualified charitable distribution. You had to write that in, but that's supposed to change this year. So my understanding is the 1099Rs for 2025 will show on there that it's a qualified charitable distribution. Because that's caused, there are people before that have thought they were taking the qualified charitable distribution, and then they didn't take the deduction, or they didn't show it that way because they didn't report it correctly. Anything else?
Anybody have a question? Big beautiful bill?
The big beautiful bill, I don't know a whole lot about it other than what I've got in that one sheet of
Social
paper.
Security, taxation,
So-
anything, anyone? And, okay, here's one.
One of the things my financial advisor told me was that when you're planning retirement in your budget, as a woman, don't forget the fingernails and the hair and all of the stuff that you think is just always gonna be there, because it may not be if you don't put that in.
If you don't plan for it. Yeah, so before you retire, I mean, it might make sense if you're doing your retirement budget to, for 6 months, keep up with everything you're spending. If you haven't been doing that, if you've just been living off of what you made, then it could make sense, for 90 days to 120 days or longer to budget everything you do and know exactly what you're really spending so that you've got a realistic idea of what that is and what needs to be cut and what you can continue to do. Some of that stuff can't be cut, I know, but you want to, but like I said, that pie is only so big. So if we make the live part bigger, then something else has got to give somewhere. So we've only got so much in the way of resources.
More years pass, prices go up.
They're going to continue going up. Yeah, it's gonna continue to go up. Anything else? All right. Well, an hour is awful long to look at my ugly mug sitting up here, so I'm going to turn this over and you.
Anybody else? Before we finish up, have a question. And of course, when we're done here, we have over 10 minutes before we start our next session. If you have a question you don't want to share it with everybody, you can come up and ask it. And we also have business cards over here, right? There's business cards if you'd like to talk to, make an appointment. That's up to you. If you want to talk to him more about a certain subject or make an appointment, you can do that. And just remind everyone, if you're signed up for our next session, it's protecting your wealth, which covers long-term care insurance, life insurance, et cetera, et cetera. That's our next session. If you're not signed up for it and you want to stay anyway. That'd be great. We'll have a different handout over here for session 2 than we did for session 1. So when we're done, make sure you come up and get the new handout. And feel free to ask questions, come up. And anything else? Anybody else? We have some great sessions next week. Look at your schedule, so feel free to sign up and come to those as well. Have you enjoyed the session today? Yeah. Great job. I learned a lot of stuff. And you confirmed some stuff that I thought I knew. So thank you so much. That was great. And I liked it because it came from a biblical perspective, right? That's what we want, is a biblical perspective. We don't look at things like the world does. So thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
All right. All right. Thanks, everyone.